A millionaire heard an 8-year-old beggar girl begging for help while she was trapped in a cage. After setting her free, the millionaire broke down in tears at the secret the girl revealed. The sky was darkening quickly as Zoe walked through the streets of the abandoned fair. Her small bare feet knew well the path between empty tents and debris that accumulated throughout the place. She had been living like this for months, since the accident took her parents. Memories of that day still haunted her during cold nights, when the wind seemed to whisper her mother's name. Zoe touched the silver pendant in the shape of a crescent moon that hung around her neck, the only tangible reminder left of her family. The cold metal against her thin fingers brought brief comfort, an almost forgotten feeling of protection. "Mom said this moon would always protect me," Zoe whispered to herself as her dark eyes watched the horizon turn red. But why did she let me stay so alone? The fair used to be a busy place during the day, with some merchants who tolerated her presence as long as she didn't cause problems. Zoe survived on food scraps and small favors, delivering messages, helping to carry light merchandise, anything that could earn a few coins or a piece of bread. Her stomach ached painfully as she searched for some food before night fell completely. That's when she heard heavy footsteps approaching rapidly from behind. Before she could run, she felt rough hands grabbing her fragile arms. Zoe tried to scream, but a calloused palm covered her mouth. "Finally found you, little rat," Travis's deep voice muttered. "You're worth more than you think." The sun had completely disappeared when Zoe was dragged to an isolated area at the back of the fair. Her screams were muffled by Travis's hand while hot tears ran down her dirty face. The man placed her in a confined space, where she realized she wasn't alone. Other children were watching her in silence, their eyes revealing the fear they felt. Travis closed the lock forcefully, making it clear there was no way out. Zoe grabbed the bars, feeling the cold metal against her delicate fingers. "Please, sir, let me go," Zoe begged, her voice broken by sobs. "I have no one. No one will miss me." The moon was high in the sky when Zoe's stomach ached with hunger. A piece of hard bread and a mug of dirty water were pushed between the bars of the cage by one of Travis's helpers. The children in the other cages received the same, some desperately fighting for the little food offered. Zoe observed everything with wide eyes, still not believing the reality that now surrounded her. One of the children coughed violently, the sound echoing off the metal walls. Next to her, in the same cage, a smaller girl was staring at the bread in Zoe's hands. Without hesitation, she broke the already small piece in half and offered it to her cage companion. "My name is Zoe," she said softly, trying to force a smile. "What's your name?" "Emily," the girl replied in an almost inaudible whisper. "Thank you for the bread." Dawn brought the sound of an approaching storm. Dark clouds began to cover the sky, announcing the imminent rain. Travis and his men were running to cover merchandise and equipment, ignoring the cages exposed to the open sky. Zoe watched everything carefully, hoping to find some gap, some opportunity to escape. But the cages were well locked and constantly guarded. One of the children in another cage began to cry, immediately receiving a shout to be quiet. The first thunder rumbled in the distance, making Emily curl up against the corner of the cage. Her big eyes revealed a deep terror. "I've been afraid of thunder since I was a baby," Emily confessed, hugging her own knees. "My mother always sang to me during storms." The wind began to blow hard, bringing the first heavy drops of rain. Soon, water was falling in torrents, quickly soaking the children's torn clothes. The clandestine fair turned into a chaos of canvases torn away and objects dragged by the wind. One of the nearby tents completely collapsed, raising cries of alarm among Travis's men. Zoe and Emily instinctively hugged each other, trying to preserve some warmth as the icy rain penetrated through the bars of the cage. Other children cried silently, trembling with cold. "Let's tell stories," Zoe suggested, trying to distract Emily from fear. "My mother used to say that stories scare away monsters." The storm increased as night approached. The wind and rain made the situation increasingly difficult. Zoe tried to protect Emily as best she could. The makeshift cover that Travis had left was carried away by the wind, exposing them to the weather conditions. Zoe began to feel a strange heat spreading through her body, even with the cold rain, the first signs that she wasn't well. "Emily, stay close to me," Zoe murmured, her voice weak. "We need to stay together to keep warm." One of Travis's men appeared carrying some old blankets. He distributed them quickly, one for each cage, not caring how many children would need to share. Zoe received a torn and dirty blanket, barely enough to cover one person. She felt the rough fabric between her fingers and looked at Emily, who was shaking violently. Without thinking twice, she wrapped the smaller girl with the blanket, leaving only a small part for herself. The cough that had started as a mild annoyance now shook her body with painful spasms. Her throat felt on fire and her head increasingly heavy. "You need the blanket more than I do," Zoe insisted, when Emily tried to divide it better. "I promised my mother I would always help those in need." The night progressed while the storm continued relentlessly. Lightning cut across the sky, briefly illuminating the pale and frightened faces of the imprisoned children. During one of the quick inspections Travis made to verify that no cage had been damaged by the storm, he noticed Zoe and Emily sharing the blanket. His face contorted into an expression of anger as he approached, splashing through the mud puddles. Zoe felt her heart quicken with fear when she saw Travis standing in front of the cage, observing them with cold eyes that reflected the lightning. "What do you think you're doing?" he shouted, his voice rising above the sound of the storm. "Teaching charity to others?" Travis abruptly opened the padlock and tore the blanket from the two girls with a single violent pull. Emily screamed, shrinking against the bars of the cage. Zoe tried to stand up, but her legs weakened under the weight of the fever now consuming her body. The rain fell directly on her, drenching her already wet hair and clothes. Travis threw the blanket outside the cage into the mud and forcefully locked the padlock again. "Learn the lesson. Here everyone looks after themselves," Travis growled, pointing a threatening finger at Zoe. "Next time will be worse." Zoe's vision began to blur as she watched Travis walk away. Her body burned with fever, cruelly contrasting with the cold rain that continued to fall. Emily crawled to her, calling her name with a frightened voice, but Zoe could no longer respond. The world around her seemed distant, as if she were submerging in deep waters. Her heavy eyes closed against her will, while the storm continued to pour water mercilessly on her small, feverish body. "Mum?" Zoe whispered in a last thread of consciousness, her fingers instinctively seeking the moon pendant on her neck. "I'm so cold." The storm lashed the deserted road with uncontrollable fury, transforming the asphalt into a raging river that made it difficult for William's luxury car to progress. The windshield wipers worked at maximum capacity, but could barely handle the volume of water accumulating on the glass. William gripped the steering wheel so tightly that his knuckles were white, while his eyes narrowed in an attempt to see the path ahead. He had spent the entire day at the rural clinic his foundation funded, personally supervising the delivery of new medical equipment. Now all he wanted was to get home, take a hot shower and rest. A deafening thunder cut across the sky, followed by a flash that briefly illuminated the desolate landscape around. The rain suddenly intensified, transforming into an impenetrable curtain that made it impossible to continue driving safely. "I can't continue like this, it's too dangerous," William muttered to himself, gradually reducing speed. "I need to stop until visibility improves a bit." The car finally stopped on the soaked shoulder. William turned on the hazard lights and took the flashlight from the glove compartment. He took a deep breath before opening the door, preparing to face the storm. The wind almost tore the door from his hands when he opened it, and in seconds his fine clothes were completely soaked. The rain was like icy needles against his skin as he exited the vehicle, protecting his eyes with one hand and raising the flashlight with the other to assess the surroundings. William directed the beam of light around, trying to orient himself. That's when he realized he had stopped near some kind of abandoned fair or market. Makeshift structures of metal and canvas swayed dangerously with the wind, some already partially destroyed by the force of the storm. "I'll have to wait a bit until this water curtain subsides," said William, running his hand through his soaked hair. "It's impossible to drive in these conditions." While William opened the trunk to get the spare tire and jack, a strange sound reached his ears, almost completely muffled by the rain and wind. He stopped, tilting his head to try to hear better. There it was again, a faint wail, almost like a child crying. William frowned, closing the trunk without taking the tools. He raised the flashlight, directing the beam of light toward where the sound seemed to come from. Curiosity and concern drove him to take a few steps toward the abandoned structures of the fair. The wail came again, more distinct this time. There was no doubt it was a child crying. "Is anyone there? Need help?" William shouted, his voice almost lost in the roar of the storm. "I'm coming closer to help." William struggled forward through the muddy terrain, feeling his expensive shoes sink with each step. The flashlight revealed an increasingly disturbing scene as he approached the partially destroyed tents. Torn canvases violently flapped in the wind. Abandoned objects floated in increasingly deep puddles. The wailing guided William beyond the first structures, toward a more isolated area at the back of the grounds. That's when his flashlight beam illuminated something that made his blood freeze, a metal cage, and inside it, small, trembling figures. William quickened his pace, slipping in the mud, regaining his balance without taking his eyes off that surreal vision. As he approached, the light revealed the horrible truth. Children. Children in cages like animals. "My God, what is this?" he exclaimed, his voice trembling with shock and indignation. "Who would do such a thing? They're just children." The scene unfolding before William's incredulous eyes was a real nightmare. Several cages lined up, each containing 2 or 3 children, all soaked by the rain that freely penetrated through the metal bars. Some looked at him with wide eyes of fear. Others seemed completely apathetic, as if they had already given up any hope. William approached the nearest cage where 2 girls huddled in a corner. One of them, smaller, violently shook the body of the other, who seemed unconscious. It was from her that the wail William had heard came, not a cry, but a desperate plea for the other to wake up. "Please, Zoe, wake up," begged little Emily, her voice broken by sobs. "Don't leave me alone, please." William ran to the cage, kneeling in the mud to be at the children's level. Through the bars he could see that the unconscious girl was burning with fever, her pale face contrasting with her heat-flushed cheeks. Her breathing was shallow and irregular. William tried to open the cage, but it was locked with a heavy padlock. Anger began to replace the initial shock, a visceral feeling that grew with each second he observed those imprisoned children. That's when a harsh voice sounded behind him, startling him. "Lost something, sir?" asked Travis, his threatening silhouette outlined against a distant lightning. "This place is private property." William rose slowly, turning to face the man. Travis wasn't alone. 2 other men positioned themselves at his side with hostile expressions. William was tall and well-built, but he knew he was outnumbered and in unfamiliar territory. Even so, the sight of children in cages had awakened something in him, a fierce determination that overcame any caution. "What's going on here?" William demanded, his voice thundering almost as loud as the storm around them. "Why are these children locked up like animals?" Travis stepped forward, a cruel smile forming on his rain-soaked face. His eyes quickly assessed William's expensive suit, the luxury watch on his wrist, the posture of authority. A rich man alone, lost in the storm, an unexpected opportunity. Travis slightly adjusted his posture, adopting a falsely professional tone. "Business, sir. Just business," he replied with a disturbing calmness. "These are just street children. Nobody wants them, nobody misses them. Wild animals we collect from the dirty sidewalks of the city." The response made William's blood boil. His eyes turned back to the cage where Zoe lay unconscious, her small, fragile form shaken by fever tremors. Emily continued to call her, increasingly desperate. Something inside William exploded, an indignation so deep that he could no longer contain himself. "She is not a wild animal," William shouted, his voice echoing through the abandoned fair. "None of them are. They're children, for God's sake, children." Travis momentarily lost his smile, surprised by the intensity of the reaction. His eyes narrowed dangerously as he made a subtle gesture for his companions to move closer. William noticed the movement but didn't back down. His eyes quickly scanned the place, assessing the situation, looking for a way out, a way to help those children. He needed to buy time, think of a plan. "How much do you want for them?" William asked, trying a new approach. "I can buy them all." "Right now." "They're not for sale to just anyone," Travis replied, regaining his composure. "We have specific buyers who pay very well. And now, I think you know too much." With a quick movement, Travis revealed he was armed, making his threat clear. Despite the danger, William remained calm. His mind worked quickly, seeking a solution. That's when he noticed the lock on the cage where Zoe was. Old, rusty, probably fragile. An idea formed in his mind. "Do you really think you can do something against me and no one will notice?" William questioned, moving strategically. "I'm William, owner of Parker Pharmacies. My absence will be noticed immediately." The name caused a visible hesitation in Travis. Parker Pharmacies were known throughout the region, and its owner was an influential man. Killing someone like that would bring serious consequences. Travis slightly lowered his weapon, reconsidering his options. It was the moment William needed. With a calculated movement, he threw his flashlight with all his strength against Travis's face, hitting him squarely. In the same instant, taking advantage of the momentary confusion, William grabbed an abandoned metal bar nearby and struck the cage's padlock with all his strength. Once, twice. On the third strike, the padlock broke. "You'll regret this," shouted Travis, recovering and advancing with fury. "You'll pay dearly for what you did." William quickly opened the cage door and took Zoe in his arms. The girl was terribly light, burning with fever. Emily clung to William's leg, looking at him with eyes that begged not to be left behind. But William knew he couldn't carry both and escape in time. Travis's men were already advancing, and Travis himself had recovered his gun. "I'll come back for you and the others, I promise," William whispered to Emily, his heart breaking at seeing the girl's devastated expression. "I'll bring help." With Zoe secure in his arms, William ran toward his car, struggling against the muddy terrain. The furious shouts of Travis and his men echoed behind him, along with threatening sounds. William moved in a zigzag pattern, taking advantage of the protection that the intense rain offered by making it difficult for his pursuers to see. He finally spotted his car, the hazard light still faithfully blinking in the darkness. With a final effort, he reached it, opening the back door with difficulty while protecting Zoe. "Hold on tight, little one," he murmured to the unconscious child, carefully placing her in the back seat. "I'll get you out of here." William ran to the driver's side, but as he opened the door, he felt Travis's threatening presence right behind him. William froze, his mind desperately seeking a way out. He couldn't fail now, not when that child's life depended on him. "You're not going anywhere," Travis hissed in his ear, "and the girl goes back where I say." At that precise moment, a metallic gleam on Zoe's neck caught William's attention. The interior light of the car revealed a silver pendant in the shape of a crescent moon. Time seemed to stop as William fixed his gaze on that small jewel. His heart skipped a beat as he recognized the object. The same pendant he had given to his sister Megan years ago, a special gift before her wedding. The same pendant he had never seen again since Megan mysteriously disappeared. William felt tears burning his eyes as reality hit him with devastating force. "Megan," he whispered, his voice choked with emotion. "My sister. This girl." William's momentary distraction was interpreted by Travis as an opportunity. He prepared to force William out of the car, but wasn't prepared for the reaction that followed. With a strength born of desperation and the revelation he had just had, William quickly spun around, deflecting the gun barrel with a movement of his arm and landing a violent punch on Travis's face. The man staggered backward, surprised by the ferocity of the attack. William took advantage of the moment to get into the car and slam the door, locking it immediately. His hands were shaking as he put the key in the ignition. "Hang on, niece," he said to Zoe, tears now freely running down his face as the engine came to life. "I'll take you home." William stomped on the accelerator, making the tires spin in the mud before finding traction. The car lurched forward, nearly running over Travis, who jumped aside at the last moment. In the back seat, Zoe's body shook with the vehicle's movement. William adjusted the rearview mirror to keep her under observation while driving. That's when he realized he had dropped his phone during the commotion. He couldn't call for help. He would have to rely solely on himself to save the girl who he now knew was his niece. "Don't worry, I'll take care of you," William promised, his eyes alternating between the road ahead and the rearview mirror. "Your family, Megan's family." William drove as fast as he dared in the terrible conditions of the waterlogged road. His thoughts were a whirlwind, questions about what had happened to his sister, how his niece had ended up in that terrible situation, mixed with immediate concern about Zoe's health condition. Her fever seemed to be worsening. Even from a distance he could see she was sweating profusely, and her breathing was becoming increasingly labored. He needed to get to a hospital as soon as possible. That's when the headlights illuminated something ahead that made his heart sink. A truck and two men completely blocking the road. Travis's men. "No, no, no," William muttered, slowing down while assessing his options. "I won't let them catch us." William braked the car at a safe distance from the blockade. He looked around desperately, searching for an alternative route. That's when he noticed, to the right, a narrow trail going up the mountainside. It looked dangerous, especially in the current conditions, but it was the only option. William sharply turned the wheel, leaving the main road and facing the steep climb. The luxury car hadn't been designed for that type of terrain, but it would have to do. The tires struggled to find grip in the mud. The engine protested with the effort. "Just a little more," William encouraged both the car and himself. "We can make it." A strange noise coming from the back seat made William look again through the rearview mirror. What he saw froze his blood. Zoe was having a seizure. Her small body was shaking violently, her eyes rolling back in their sockets. William felt panic rising, threatening to overwhelm him. He was alone without a phone, on a dangerous trail during a storm, with a seriously ill child he had just discovered was his niece, and dangerous men on his trail. The situation couldn't be more desperate. "Hang in there, Zoe," William begged, his voice choked with fear and determination. "I won't lose you too." The car continued to climb painfully up the mountain trail, each meter conquered with extreme difficulty. The rain gave no respite, turning the path into a treacherous, muddy mess. Through the rearview mirror, William could see lights approaching. Travis's men had discovered his path and were now pursuing him. At the same time, Zoe's seizure continued, seemingly endless. William had never felt so helpless, torn between the need to focus on the dangerous driving and the desperation of not being able to help his niece in that crucial moment. His tears mixed with the rainwater still running down his face as he struggled to maintain control of the vehicle on the steep and slippery trail. "I won't give up," William declared, his voice firm despite the tremor in his hands. "No matter what happens, I won't give up on you." The lights of the public hospital shone intensely against the still dark sky when William finally managed to arrive after the dangerous crossing through the mountain trail. His hands were still shaking on the steering wheel, his soaked shirt clinging to his body, as he abruptly parked at the emergency entrance. In the back seat, Zoe had stopped convulsing, but remained unconscious, her breathing shallow and labored. William jumped out of the vehicle and ran to the back door, taking the girl in his arms with the care of someone carrying the most fragile of treasures. Her body was impossibly light and warm, burning with fever. The automatic doors of the emergency room opened at his approach, and William burst into the illuminated interior of the hospital, his voice breaking the relative silence of the place. "Please, help! This girl needs urgent care," shouted William, immediately attracting the attention of the medical staff on duty. "She has a very high fever, had seizures on the way." A nurse ran toward him, followed by a doctor who quickly assessed the critical situation. In a matter of seconds, a stretcher was brought, and professional hands took Zoe from William's reluctant arms. The doctor had already begun examining the girl, shouting orders to the team as they quickly took her to an emergency room. William tried to follow, but was gently detained by another nurse who guided him to the reception. "I need to stay with her," William insisted, his wet clothes forming a puddle on the hospital floor. "She has no one else. I'm all she has now." "You need to give us some information first, so we can properly treat the patient," the nurse replied firmly, but not without compassion. "Meanwhile, our team is doing everything possible for her, believe me." William watched helplessly as Zoe disappeared behind the emergency room doors. His heart felt compressed in his chest, a mixture of fear, hope, and the recent discovery that had turned his world upside down. Mechanically, he followed the nurse to the reception counter, where he began answering the routine questions. "Patient's name?" William hesitated. He didn't know Zoe's last name. "Age?" "Approximately 8 years old," he estimated. "Medical history?" "Unknown." "Relationship to the patient?" Here William paused, the reality of his situation finally hitting him with full force. He was soaked, exhausted without the girl's documents, unable to prove kinship without a convincing explanation for the deplorable state she was in. "I'm her uncle," he finally said, his voice low but firm. "I've just found her after searching for a long time. Please, I don't have all the answers right now, but that girl is my niece, and I need to be with her." While waiting in the waiting room, Time seemed to drag on for William. The uncomfortable plastic chairs, the smell of antiseptic, the occasional murmur of other waiting patients, everything seemed unreal, as if he were living in a parallel dimension. His thoughts flew to Megan, his younger sister, her bright smile, her free spirit. The last time he had seen her had been before her marriage to Brian, a man William never approved of. There was something about him that didn't inspire trust, something predatory in his gaze when no one else was watching. William had questioned his sister's choice, causing a heated argument that ended with Megan leaving the family home in tears, swearing that William would never see her again. And she kept her word. After the wedding, William's attempts to contact her were systematically ignored. Then years ago, Megan simply disappeared. Brian claimed that she had abandoned them, him and their small daughter, running away with another man. William never believed that story, but never managed to prove that something more sinister had occurred. His attempts to find the niece he had never met were also frustrated by Brian, who moved to another city and disappeared off the map. "Megan, where are you?" William muttered to himself, running his hand over his tired face. "What happened to you? What did they do to your daughter?" It was at this moment that William realized he was still holding something in his hand. The crescent moon pendant he had torn from Zoe's neck during the tumult of arriving at the hospital. He looked at the small silver jewel, now stained by rain and dirt, but still recognizable. William clearly remembered the day he had bought it for Megan on her 18th birthday. She had always been fascinated by the moon, spending hours on the porch observing its phases. "The moon always watches over us, no matter where we are," she used to say. William had chosen the crescent moon pendant especially for this reason, a symbol that, even far apart, they would always be connected under the same moonlight. "My dear sister, what happened for your daughter to end up in that cage?" whispered William, his voice broken with emotion. "I promise I'll take care of her now. I won't fail this time." William absently twirled the pendant between his fingers, observing the delicate details of the silver work. That's when he noticed something he hadn't seen before, a small lateral slit, almost imperceptible. The pendant wasn't just an ornament, but a locket that could be opened. Carefully, William inserted his fingernail into the slit and applied light pressure. The locket opened with a soft click, revealing an internal compartment. William brought the object close to his eyes, hardly daring to breathe. There, protected inside the locket, was a tiny photograph, faded by time but still discernible. Megan's smiling face. The sight brought tears to William's eyes, the final confirmation that his suspicions were correct. "It was always with you, wasn't it, Megan?" murmured William, gently touching the small photograph. "You found a way to stay with your daughter even after you were gone." The evidence was undeniable. Zoe wasn't just any child that William had rescued by chance. She was his niece, Megan's daughter, his own flesh and blood. The coincidence was too great to be ignored. William closed his eyes, letting tears flow freely down his face. The pendant represented not only the connection between him and Megan, but now also a link to Zoe, a promise of protection that transcended time and distance. When he reopened his eyes, his expression had changed. The initial confusion and shock had given way to fierce determination. No matter what had happened in the past, he would do everything in his power to protect that child. "Sir, Mr. William?" called a voice, interrupting his thoughts. William looked up to find two men in police uniform standing before him. One of them, older and with a grave expression, spoke while the other maintained a vigilant posture, observing William's every movement. "Officer Thompson," the older policeman introduced himself, briefly showing his badge. "We need to talk about the girl you brought in. The doctors called us due to the condition she's in." William felt a tightness in his chest, but nodded slowly. He had expected this. A child arriving at the hospital in such precarious conditions would inevitably arouse suspicion. He carefully tucked the medallion into the pocket of his wet shirt and stood up to accompany the officers. They were led to a small room at the back of the waiting area, probably used for private conversations with family members or for delivering bad news. Officer Thompson indicated a chair for William and sat across from him, while the other policeman remained standing near the door. "Mr. William, can you explain exactly how you found this child and why she was in this state?" asked Thompson, his voice professional but with an evident hint of suspicion. "The girl shows signs of prolonged malnutrition, severe dehydration, and what doctors suspect is advanced pneumonia. These aren't conditions that develop in just a few hours. William took a deep breath, organizing his thoughts. He had to be careful. The truth would sound so absurd that it could easily be interpreted as an elaborate lie. On the other hand, he couldn't risk the police not investigating the place where Zoe and the other children were being held. He decided on honesty, even if it meant more questioning. "I found her locked in a cage," William began, watching the officer's eyebrows rise in disbelief. "I'm not making this up. I was heading home when the storm forced me to stop near an abandoned fairground. I heard crying and, upon investigating, found several children locked in cages like animals. Zoe was unconscious, burning with fever. A man named Travis and his thugs tried to stop me from helping her, but I managed to free her and escape with her to bring her to the hospital." Officer Thompson exchanged a meaningful look with his colleague before turning his attention back to William. His next questions were even more incisive, seeking specific details about the location, descriptions of the men involved, how many children he had seen, how he had managed to escape. William answered everything with as much precision as possible, emphasizing the urgency of sending teams to rescue the other children. He could sense the officer's reluctance to believe the story. Human trafficking cases weren't uncommon, but finding children caged in an abandoned fairground seemed extracted from a horror movie, not reality. "And what is your relationship with the girl, Mr. William?" Officer Thompson finally asked, watching him intently. "Why risk your life for an unknown child?" William felt the weight of the medallion in his shirt pocket. It was the moment of truth, literally. Slowly, he removed the pendant and placed it on the table between them. "I didn't know at the time of the rescue, but I discovered afterward that Zoe is my niece," William explained, opening the medallion to show the photograph. "This is my sister Megan, who disappeared years ago. I recognized the medallion because I was the one who gave it to her. Inside is her photo, a confirmation of what I suspected when I saw the pendant around Zoe's neck." The interrogation continued for another hour, with the police questioning every detail of the story. William explained about Megan's disappearance, his suspicions about her husband Brian, his frustrated attempts to find his niece. He talked about his foundation, his work with rural clinics, offering to provide all necessary contacts to confirm his identity and reputation. Gradually, the officer's initial distrust began to give way to reluctant acceptance. The story was extraordinary, but the evidence of the medallion, combined with William's evident sincerity, weighed in his favor. Officer Thompson made some final notes before putting away his notepad. "We'll send teams to the location you described immediately," he said, standing up. "If we find the children as you reported, this will confirm your story. As for your claim of kinship with the girl, we'll need more than a medallion with an old photo. DNA tests will be necessary if you want to establish legal guardianship." "I'll take any test necessary," William assured him, feeling cautious relief as he realized the police would take his report seriously. "I just want to make sure Zoe and the other children are safe." "Just one more thing, Mr. William," added Officer Thompson, already at the door. "You shouldn't leave the hospital until our investigation confirms your story. We consider you a key witness at this moment, not a suspect, but we need you to remain available for more questions." William nodded, agreeing to the reasonable condition. He had no intention of going anywhere while Zoe was being treated. After the officers left, he returned to the waiting room, the medallion firmly secured in his hand. The following hours passed in a blur of anxious waiting, occasionally interrupted by nurses passing by without any updates on Zoe's condition. William stayed close to the doors leading to the emergency ward, waiting for any sign, any news. "Please, she's all I have left of my sister," he murmured repeatedly, like a silent prayer. "Don't take her too. Not when I've just found her." The sun had fully risen, illuminating the waiting room through the high windows, when William noticed a different movement among the medical staff. One of the doctors, with a grave expression and wrinkled coat, after what seemed to have been a long shift, was heading in his direction. William stood up instantly, his heart racing, trying to interpret the professional's expression even before he spoke. The doctor stopped in front of him, his eyes tired and his countenance heavy. "Mr. William? I'm Dr. Peterson, responsible for the girl Zoe's case," the doctor introduced himself, his voice controlled, but with an underlying tension that William immediately recognized as a bad sign. We did everything within our power. The pneumonia was very advanced, causing severe pulmonary compromise. The severe dehydration and malnutrition further complicated the situation. William felt his legs weaken, but forced himself to remain standing, clutching the medallion as if it were an anchor to reality. The doctor continued, each word falling like a weight on William's already burdened shoulders. "I'm sorry, Mr. Parker," said the doctor, his voice choked with contained emotion. "Her heart stopped. We're trying to resuscitate her, but 3 minutes have passed without response. If you're religious, this would be the time for a prayer." The world around William seemed to crumble with those words. A buzzing filled his ears, muffling all other sounds in the hospital. Without realizing what he was doing, he pushed the doctor aside and ran toward the emergency doors, ignoring the staff's shouts to stop. He wasn't thinking clearly anymore. He just knew he needed to be by Zoe's side, needed to hold her, needed to make her feel she wasn't alone. "She can't die," William shouted as he ran through the corridors. The medallion clutched in his hand so tightly that the sharp corners cut into his palm. Not after everything. Not after finally finding her. William burst into the emergency room, where a team of doctors and nurses worked frantically around Zoe's small, motionless body. The heart monitor showed a flat line, the continuous sound of the alarm echoing through the room. A doctor was applying chest compressions, another was preparing the defibrillator again. No one noticed William immediately, so concentrated were they in the battle against time. He approached slowly, as if in a trance, observing Zoe's pale face, now clean of the cage's dirt, but devoid of the life he had glimpsed even in her feverish moments the night before. "Niece," whispered William, tears flowing freely down his face as he approached the stretcher. "Megan, help me save her, please." A nurse finally noticed his presence and tried to pull him away, explaining that he couldn't be there, that he needed to let the team work. William initially resisted, but then a sudden thought struck him. With deliberate movements, he placed the medallion in Zoe's small inert hand, closing her fingers around the object. "Your mother is with you," said William, his voice trembling with emotion. "And I am too. Fight, Zoe. Please fight." The medical team observed the scene, momentarily touched by the man's raw emotion, before gently moving him aside to continue the resuscitation procedures. The main physician prepared for another attempt with the defibrillator, positioning the paddles on Zoe's small chest. "Step back," he ordered, and everyone took a step back, applying shock. Zoe's body arched slightly with the electrical discharge, falling motionless again on the stretcher. All eyes turned to the cardiac monitor, waiting, praying for any sign. The line remained flat, the alarm sound persistent. The doctor prepared for a new attempt when suddenly a small spike appeared on the screen, followed by another and then another. Weak, irregular heartbeats, but present. "We have cardiac rhythm," announced a nurse, her voice loaded with relief and disbelief. "She's coming back." William, watching from the door where he had been led, finally felt his legs give way. He slid down the wall to the floor, openly sobbing, a mixture of relief, exhaustion, and gratitude consuming him completely. The medallion with Megan's photo was still secure in Zoe's hand, as if her mother had answered the desperate call, bringing her daughter back from the threshold between life and death. "Thank you, Megan," William murmured through tears, watching the medical team stabilize Zoe's still fragile vital signs. "I promise I'll take care of her from now on. She'll never be alone again." But the morning sun finally penetrated completely through the hospital windows, bathing the emergency room with a golden light that seemed almost divine in its intensity. For William, it was as if the universe itself was signaling a new beginning, a second chance to protect his sister's legacy and repair the mistakes of the past. Zoe had returned, and with her, a part of Megan also lived again. "Your fight is just beginning, little one," William whispered, still sitting on the floor while watching the doctors working to stabilize his niece. "But now you're no longer alone in this battle." The golden evening light bathed the extensive gardens of William's mansion, creating a carpet of elongated shadows on the perfectly trimmed lawn. 3 months had passed since that fateful night at the abandoned fairground. 3 months since Zoe had been on the brink of death in that emergency room. Now, recovered from her physical wounds, the girl walked slowly among the rose bushes, occasionally touching the colorful petals with her fingertips. Her body had gradually strengthened, bones no longer prominent under her skin, cheeks regaining a healthy tone, hair now shiny and well cared for. But her eyes still carried the shadows of memories, and her voice remained a guarded mystery. Since the rescue, Zoe had not uttered a single word, as if her voice had been left behind in that cage. Doctors assured that there was no physical impediment. The muteness was a response to trauma, a form of protection that her young spirit had found. William watched her from the veranda, his heart divided between gratitude for having her there, alive and safe, and concern for the invisible scars she still carried. "Sometimes I think I hear Megan's voice in her silence," William confessed to the housekeeper serving tea by his side. "It's as if my sister were here, watching through her eyes, waiting for me to do everything right this time." Zoe's recovery had been an arduous journey. William vividly recalled the weeks in the hospital, the endless days by the girl's bedside, the constant fear that her fragile heart might stop again. The image of those 6 minutes of resuscitation was etched in his memory like a scar. Zoe's small body shaking with the defibrillator shocks, the agonizing silence between each attempt, the miracle of the first heartbeat after what seemed like an eternity. Doctors had used the word extraordinary to describe her survival, especially without neurological sequelae, after so much time without cerebral oxygenation. William was not a religious man, but at that moment he had thanked any higher power that might exist. When they finally received authorization to leave the hospital, William had promised himself that he would dedicate the rest of his life to giving Zoe everything she deserved: safety, comfort, education, and above all, unconditional love. 6 minutes seemed like 6 lifetimes, William murmured to himself as he watched Zoe kneel to examine more closely a butterfly perched on a flower. Each second was like an abyss opening under my feet, swallowing all possibilities of future. The police had acted quickly after William's report, locating the abandoned fairground on the same morning that Zoe was hospitalized. They found the cages exactly as he had described, with 17 children imprisoned in deplorable conditions. The operation to dismantle the human trafficking network, led by Travis, proved to be larger than anyone could have imagined. Investigations led to other similar facilities, exposing a criminal organization that had been operating for years, selling vulnerable children for forced labor, illegal adoptions, and other even darker fates that William preferred not to contemplate. Travis and his main associates were captured trying to flee the region, and the evidence against them was overwhelming. The trial had been swift, and the sentences exemplary. William had testified in court, looking directly into the eyes of the man who had kept his niece in a cage, feeling a disturbing mixture of hatred and pity. Travis would spend the rest of his days in a cell, a form of poetic justice that did not escape William's perception. "May he find redemption in his confinement," William had said as he left the courthouse after the sentencing. "Though some cages are justly deserved, while others are a monstrosity against innocence." The most moving aspect for William had been the fate of the other rescued children. Using his influence and financial resources, he had created a special foundation to help with the physical and psychological recovery of the small victims and to assist in locating their families. Cases like that of Emily, the girl who had shared the cage with Zoe, had broken his heart. Orphaned for years with no known relatives, her future seemed uncertain until a family from the region, touched by her story, offered to adopt her. William had personally verified the integrity of prospective adoptive parents, visiting their homes, talking at length with them, ensuring that each child would have a genuine second chance. For those whose families had been located, William provided financial assistance and psychological support for reintegration. Some families discovered that their children, given up as missing or even dead, were alive. Emotional reunions that William had witnessed with tears in his eyes, always thinking of Megan and the reunion that would never happen. The pain doesn't disappear, we just find larger spaces within ourselves to accommodate it, William reflected as he watched Zoe following the butterfly through the garden. And perhaps that's how we grow, creating more space in our hearts, both for pain and for love. On the mansion's porch, William stood up as he saw Zoe returning from her walk in the garden. She was now walking toward him, holding something cupped in her hands, probably another of the small discoveries that so fascinated her in this new, safe world. William smiled encouragingly, as he always did, respecting her silence but keeping the doors of communication perpetually open. The child psychologist who saw Zoe 3 times a week had assured him that she would speak when she was ready, that one couldn't rush the healing of such deep wounds. William had learned to communicate with her in other ways: expressions, gestures, drawings, and mainly through the constant and patient presence that represented the security she had never had. When Zoe reached the porch, she carefully opened her hands, revealing a small red rose petal perfectly formed. William knelt down to be at eye level with her. "It's beautiful, Zoe," he said softly, without pressing for a verbal response. "Perfect. Just like you, in your own unique way of being." That night, after dinner, William led Zoe to the mansion's library, a cozy room with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, comfortable armchairs, and a fireplace that crackled invitingly, even in the warm season, more for the psychological comfort it provided than for the need for heat. It was a ritual they had established in recent weeks, sitting together while William showed her photographs and told stories about her mother, Megan. The first time, he wasn't sure if it would be too painful for Zoe, but the attentive eyes of the girl and her evident hunger for any information about her lost mother convinced him to continue. That night, William had set aside a special album with photographs he had not yet shown. Zoe settled beside him in the large armchair, her feet barely touching the floor, as William carefully opened the leather-bound album. "This album has photographs of when your mother was just a little older than you," explained William, showing the first image, a Megan of approximately 10 years old, smiling broadly, with 2 front teeth missing. She was always smiling, you know. Even when she fell and scraped her knees, she found a reason to smile soon after. The pages of the album revealed a visual history of Megan's childhood and adolescence, playing on the beach, blowing out birthday candles, riding a horse with a determined expression, proudly holding a school competition trophy, graduating from high school with honors. William narrated each moment affectionately, revealing small details about Megan's personality, her dreams, her mischief, her passions. He told how she loved adventure stories, how she talked about traveling the world someday, how she passionately defended those she considered wronged. He spoke about her melodious voice when she sang, about how she could spend hours observing the stars, about her collection of colorful stones that she believed had magical powers. In each story, each shared memory, William tried to give Zoe the most valuable gift he could offer, the knowledge of who her mother really was, beyond a faded photograph in a locket. "Your mother will live forever as long as we remember her, Zoe," said William, his voice soft in the quietness of the library. "And in you, I see so much of her, not just in your eyes or the shape of your face, but in your courage, in your kindness to little Emily, even when you yourself were suffering." The following morning dawned grey and damp, reflecting the apprehension William felt. It was the day of the final hearing in family court, the decisive moment when it would be determined whether he would obtain permanent custody of Zoe. DNA tests had already confirmed the kinship, establishing William as the girl's biological uncle. The reports from social workers who had visited the mansion were positive, emphasizing the safe and welcoming environment that William provided, as well as the visible progress in Zoe's physical and emotional recovery under his care. Everything indicated a favorable decision until an unexpected obstacle emerged a week before. A lawyer representing Zoe's paternal family had filed a petition contesting custody. Apparently, Brian's father, Zoe's paternal grandfather, claimed rights over the girl, arguing that the paternal family had legal precedence over a maternal uncle. William suspected financial motivations. The news of the rescue and kinship with the millionaire businessman had received considerable media coverage. His own lawyer assured him that the challenge had little chance of success, considering the circumstances of the case and the best interest of the child, but the mere possibility of losing Zoe caused William a dread he couldn't express in words. "How do I explain to a court what it means to me to have the chance to protect Megan's daughter?" muttered William as he adjusted his tie in front of the mirror. "How do I translate into legal terms a promise made to the heart of an absent sister?" The family court was packed that morning. The case had attracted attention not only for its connection to the police operation against the human trafficking network, but also for the involvement of William, a prominent figure in business and philanthropic circles. Zoe, dressed in a simple blue dress and white shoes, firmly held William's hand as they walked through the marble hallway. The crescent moon-shaped locket, now restored and polished, hung around her neck. William had insisted she wear it today as a protective talisman and a reminder of her true identity. His lawyer met them at the entrance to the courtroom, offering reassuring words about the case's prospects. William, however, could only focus on Zoe's eyes, which observed everything with an intensity that suggested understanding beyond her years. "We're in this together, little one," whispered William, kneeling to be at her eye level. "No matter what happens in there, I promise I'll always be by your side one way or another." The hearing began with legal formalities: introduction of attorneys, establishment of the facts of the case, review of relevant documentation. The judge, a middle-aged man with a serene expression and attentive eyes, first heard from William's attorney, who presented compelling arguments about the bond formed between uncle and niece, the emotional and financial stability offered, and the psychological reports advising against any additional disruption in the already traumatized child's life. Then the paternal family's lawyer took the floor, emphasizing the direct blood ties, subtly questioning the ability of a single businessman to properly raise a child, and suggesting that Zoe would be better off with a complete family, insinuating that the paternal grandfather could offer a more traditional family structure. William felt his blood boil upon hearing such arguments, knowing the true nature of that family, who had never shown any interest in Zoe until that moment. But he kept his expression composed, aware that any display of temper could harm his case. "Truth will prevail," he repeated mentally like a mantra. "What matters is only Zoe's well-being, nothing more." As the crucial moment came when the judge, after hearing arguments from both sides, addressed William directly, questioning him about his motivations and his long-term commitment to the child. William stood up, feeling the weight of that moment, aware that his words could determine the future for both of them. He spoke with an open heart about his lost sister, about the miracle of finding Zoe, about how he saw in her not just a responsibility, but a gift, a second chance to honor Megan's memory and to build a family, even if not in the conventional way. He described the small daily progress, the first genuine smile, the first night without nightmares, the gradual relaxation of her always defensive posture. He talked about his plans for the future, the school he had carefully researched, the ongoing therapy, the trips he planned to expand Zoe's horizons when she was ready. And finally, with a voice choked with emotion, William expressed his deepest fear. "Your Honor," he concluded, "I'm not just here seeking the right to raise my niece. I'm begging for the chance not to fail her as I failed my sister, not noticing the signs, not insisting more, not being there when she needed me most. Zoe has given me a reason to be better than I've ever been, and all I ask is the opportunity to prove that to her every day for the rest of my life." A heavy silence fell over the room after William's words. The judge observed him at length, assessing his sincerity, before turning his eyes to Zoe, who remained quiet beside William's lawyer. With gentleness uncommon in courtrooms, the magistrate asked the girl to approach. William felt his heart race. Zoe had never been separated from him in unfamiliar environments since the rescue, and he feared how she would react. To his surprise, Zoe stood up without hesitation and walked with small but determined steps to the front of the room, stopping before the judge. The magistrate leaned slightly toward her, speaking in a soft tone. "Zoe," he began, "I know you've been through very difficult times, and I don't want you to feel pressured. But if you could tell me somehow who you prefer to stay with, your Uncle William or your paternal grandfather, that would help me greatly to make the right decision for you." William held his breath, aware that the judge probably wasn't expecting a verbal response, given Zoe's muteness since the rescue. Perhaps a gesture, a look in the direction of her choice. What happened next, however, left the entire room in shock. Zoe brought her hand to the medallion on her neck, holding it as if seeking strength. And then, for the first time in 3 months, her voice filled the room, initially hesitant, almost a whisper, but gaining firmness with each word. "He saved me when I was just a caged animal," said Zoe, her voice surprisingly clear and decisive for someone who had remained silent for so long. "Now I know I am Zoe Parker, and I want to stay with my uncle." The simplicity and certainty of those words seemed to suspend time in the courtroom. William felt tears flowing freely down his face, unable to contain the emotion upon hearing his niece's voice again, and especially the words she had chosen. The judge, visibly moved, thanked Zoe and asked her to return to her place. The girl, however, didn't return to her original seat. Instead, she walked directly to William and extended her arms in a silent request to be lifted. William took her in his arms, embracing her as if he would never let her go, feeling Zoe's small body tremble slightly against his, not from fear, but from an emotion long contained. "I knew your voice was in there, just waiting for the right moment," William whispered in her ear, gently cradling her. "Thank you for trusting me enough to let it out." The rest of the hearing was a formality. The judge, clearly influenced by Zoe's unexpected testimony, as well as the favorable reports from specialists, delivered his decision without further delay. Permanent custody of Zoe was granted to William, with the provision that follow-up reports would be necessary during the first year to ensure the continuity of the child's well-being. The paternal family's attorney tried to protest, mentioning the possibility of appealing, but the judge was firm, emphasizing that the court prioritized the child's interests above all others. When they finally left the courthouse, William and Zoe emerged into a day that had transformed. The gray clouds had dissipated, revealing a sky of an almost impossible blue, as if the universe itself was celebrating the rebirth of that small, improvised family. "We are a family now, officially," William said as they walked to the car, still amazed by the sound of Zoe's voice and the weight of her small hand in his. "You and I, and the memory of your mother always with us." On the way back to the mansion, Zoe broke her long silence again, asking questions in a torrent, as if all the words accumulated during the months of mutism now needed to be released at once. She asked about her mother, about what William's life was like as a child, about the other rescued children, especially Emily. William patiently answered each question, amazed at the clarity of thought and surprising articulation for an 8-year-old who had been through so much. In a particularly moving moment, Zoe asked if she could call William uncle, or if that would bother him. The question, so simple and so profound, made William pull the car over to the shoulder for a moment, unable to continue driving through the tears that blurred his vision. "You can call me whatever you want, Zoe," he replied, his voice breaking. "Uncle, William, or simply family, because that's what we are now to each other." When they arrived at the mansion, the sun was already beginning to set, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink that reflected in the windows of the house, transforming it into a palace of gold and fire. Zoe ran ahead, climbing the entrance steps with an energy that William had never seen in her before, as if an invisible weight had been removed from her small shoulders. The housekeeper greeted them with a curious expression, having been informed by phone only that the hearing had been successful. When Zoe greeted her verbally, the woman brought her hands to her face in surprise and joy. William observed the scene with a smile, feeling strangely complete for the first time in many years. Later, after the celebratory dinner and a warm bath, William found Zoe in her room, already dressed in pajamas, sitting on the bed and looking contemplatively at the medallion in her hands. He knocked softly on the half-open door before entering, always respecting the personal space that he knew was so important to someone who had been deprived of all privacy and dignity. Zoe looked up when she saw him and smiled, a genuine smile that lit up her face, in a way that William now recognized as identical to Megan's smile in the photographs. "May I come in?" William asked, maintaining the routine of asking permission, even now that the circumstances had changed so dramatically. "Or would you prefer to be alone with your thoughts?" Zoe motioned for him to enter and sit beside her on the bed. For a moment they sat in silence, a comfortable silence that didn't need to be filled with words. Then, with reverent care, Zoe extended the medallion toward William, as if offering a precious gift. "I wanted to thank you," she said, her voice still new and surprising to William's ears. "For finding me, for saving me, for making me remember who I am." William felt a lump in his throat as he realized the full significance of that gesture and those words. Gently, he took the medallion from Zoe's small hands, but only to place it back around her neck where it belonged. "No, Zoe," he replied softly, stroking the girl's hair tenderly. I'm the one who should thank you for making me remember who I am too. That night, as the house quieted and the outside world seemed distant and insignificant, William remained by Zoe's bedside until she fell asleep, watching her regular breathing, the medallion glowing softly in the lamplight. A new family had been born from the ashes of tragedy, built on pain but also on love and hope. A family not defined by blood or legal documents, but by the conscious choice of two wounded souls to walk together toward healing. And under the same starry night sky, William felt for the first time in many years the serene presence of Megan, not as a ghost of guilt and regret, but as a silent blessing upon the future that now opened before them. "Rest in peace, my sister," William whispered to the night as he gently closed the door to Zoe's room. "I promise that your daughter will never again be a caged animal, but a star free to shine with all her light." Did you enjoy William and Zoe's story? Then subscribe to the channel, leave your like and comment where you're watching from. Oh, and there's another story waiting for you here on the screen. Click there and I'll be waiting for you.